So before I start this video off, I want to say my bad, guys. Raptors versus Sixers game one was supposed to upload yesterday, but YouTube kind of laid a massive egg and it got stuck at processing 84% for the entirety of the night. And I had some personal things to deal with, so I had no idea until I got back to my workstation today that the video had not actually been uploaded. So as a result of that, and the fact that yesterday's game was pretty early, I have decided to also cover the matchup between the Boston Celtics and the Milwaukee Bucks. And either one of these teams is going to be a potential opponent for Toronto coming into the second round. So think of this as kind of like advanced scouting, so to speak. Um, but yeah, anyway, this matchup in general, I think, is the most intriguing out of any matchup in the second round, simply because of the fact that I think if there's any team that could really give Milwaukee a problem, or pull an upset off in Vegas, it would be the Boston Celtics. And I know if you're from the Raptor subreddit, if you're from our NBA, the whole catchphrase is "fuck the Celtics," and it's we're not going to get into any of that. So game one, Celtics are at the Pfizer Forum Arena in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And the game's pretty early, 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern time. And it starts off with a Chris Middleton 3. And this this 3 in particular and how it's set up is kind of indicative of how the Bucks like to run their offense and their philosophy regarding basketball under Mike Budenholzer, right? And it's basically nothing in the paint unless it's post moves or layups. You either shoot your threes or you drive. No mid-range jumpers, nothing like that. So the roster itself is basically equipped to surround Giannis, who's the star player, with a bunch of shooters. And the essential possession, the ideal possession goes like this. Giannis gets the ball, drives in, and one of two outcomes occurs. One, he manages to get a bucket and one, sending him to the line, right? Or two, if he gets triple teamed, he kicks the ball out to any of the open shooters and they knock it from far away, right? This is going to force the defense to either commit an extra man to the three-point line or commit that extra man to Giannis. He's the leader and like the spirit of the team. Game starts off with a Chris Middleton three-pointer. And personally, even before the series started, I actually predicted Boston to win this in 7 games. And the reason why is because I just do not trust Milwaukee because of their lack of experience. I simply do not trust that. Like, even though they whammed on Detroit, right? And it's Detroit with Dwayne Casey, and an injured Blake Griffin. So you can't really take too much from that, right? Even though they like completely eviscerated Detroit, I just don't see them being able to take out a battle-hardened Boston Celtics that seems to have finally gotten it together, right? But anyway, Milwaukee's offense, it comes out strong in the first like 3 minutes, but then it starts to stall immediately because you got Boston catching fire with Kyrie Irving, and their defense really starts to take away the dribble drive and the transition offense from the Milwaukee Bucks. And what I mean by this is the Celtics have decided to have 3 guys protecting the paint, or eliminating the transition offense for Giannis Antetokounmpo at all times. And the natural response and counter to this is for Giannis to dish it out to a three-point shooter. The only problem is the three-point shooting for Milwaukee was not good today. It was pretty fucking bad. Aside from Brook Lopez and Nikola Mirotic, you didn't really have, and even Giannis to a certain extent, but this was like much later down the line in the game, right? You didn't have many contributors, right? Like if you look at this three-point shooting, Pat Connaughton, George Hill, right? Ersan Ilyasova, who you got as a three-point shooter. It's just, there wasn't enough three-point shooting and opportunities. And because of this, the Celtics were actually able to, as the game went on, cheat on the three-point line, and just completely crowd the paint. So now your transition offense is completely donezo because your three-point shooters can't make a shot, right? But anyway, back to the first quarter. Celtics are able to catch fire with Kyrie, like I just said. They go on an 11-1 run in response to Milwaukee's initial spark of offense in the first 2-3 minutes of the game, right? And towards the end of the first quarter, we can see that, Boston has won the first quarter by, 9 points? So they're 9 points ahead. And at this point, they've managed to force 4 turnovers onto Milwaukee. They did not come as prepared as Boston. And Boston really capitalized on this, and they took this momentum that they had into the second quarter. Now, Kyrie is subbed off, and now it's mainly Horford and Hayward that are initiating the offense for the Celtics. And to their credit, they do a decent job, but you can see the impact of Kyrie. Having that one player that's just going to get the points no matter how much defense you throw on him is crucial in these playoffs, like a clutch player. So Giannis continues to attack the paint, and he's drawing fouls. And Boston's response to Giannis is mainly, aside from their triple teaming of him, is to mainly stick a lengthy big on him in the guy of Aaron Baines. And Aaron Baines does a pretty good job of offering rim protection for Boston. Now, Milwaukee starts to actually get a little bit going in the second quarter because they have Nikola Mirotic and George Hill, who spark a little bit of a bench run with back-to-back transition threes. And it's with these transition threes that you really start to see why Milwaukee has been so successful in large part of the regular season and against teams that just do not have the length and the athleticism to contend with them. As the second quarter really went on, I started to see that Boston's offense continued to adapt to the length of Milwaukee. And what I mean by this is they really utilize that space that that Milwaukee does not use for offense to their advantage. And this came in the form of, contested fadeaway jumpers, mid-range jump shots. You don't see a lot of teams taking the mid-range, but Boston really went to the mid-range this game to kind of answer the transition offense that Milwaukee was trying to run. And this was effective in two ways. One, if you're using, the mid-range jump shot, the length of Milwaukee is it's still going to be a problem, but it's not going to be as much of a problem as it would be on the three-point line. And what I mean by this is, if Milwaukee can force a turnover on the three-point line, they're going to get to the rim a lot quicker than if they force a turnover when you're in the paint, because there's just simply more distance to cover, an extra dribble, an extra step, so to speak. And, the closer you are to the paint, the shorter the passing lanes are. So, for example, if Boston's offense settled on the three-point line and was moving the ball around, it would be a lot easier for Milwaukee's length to really come in and just kind of interrupt that passing lane, get a fast break, and a quick transition dunk or three. But because Boston was going with the mid-range game, that lane started to really close up, and the advantage of the length wasn't as much. Because now you have people literally, next to each other doing handoffs and, taking guys one-on-one isolation or just driving in and doing floaters, that kind of stuff. But basically using paint offense, mid-range jumpers to kind of negate any chance of a turnover via transition. Now, this obviously will not work all the time because, the jumpers that Boston made, a lot of them were tough mid-range shots. Like, Kyrie was going to town. Like, he was cooking. But some of those shots, like that fadeaway, right? Like, he had many of those. But just, it's absurd. Like, these are not easy shots to make. And I don't think Boston is going to be that strong in the mid-range game again next game. Now, the same can also be said for Milwaukee in that they missed a lot of good looks at the three-point line. And I don't think Milwaukee's going to shoot this poorly. They had a really poor night from the three-point line. I personally don't think that's going to happen again. So I think the next game is going to be a lot closer. But as far as I'm concerned, like when I'm watching in live time in the second quarter, it seems that this is Boston's strategy, and maybe in the future matchups with Toronto, this could be a strategy, assuming Milwaukee advances, to deal with their length and Giannis in particular. Now, Hayward also starts to get going in the second quarter. This is kind of almost counteracted by Mirotic, and you really see that Milwaukee is thriving on an increased pace of the game. Their entire offense, like I mentioned earlier, with the transition, forcing turnovers, they like it when there's just no time for the defense to establish anything. I mean, every team likes it, but Milwaukee particularly thrives off of the fast break points. And when you take that away, right, length is just no longer as much of a factor. We see Boston kind of start to slow down the pace, really work their way down in the shot clock before they actually, take a contested jumper or manage to catch a break down on Milwaukee's defense. Now, towards I think midway through the second quarter, Milwaukee goes on a 15-0 run. And this is where the bench of Nikola Mirotic and George Hill that I mentioned earlier starts to really catch fire. And I think they bring it to what? They bring it to within 3 or 4. They get it down close, and I think they tie and almost take a lead at one point. At the end of the second quarter, I was thinking, okay, so if Milwaukee is able to continue to, find these transition points, they're going to run away with the game because they can make their threes if they get the rhythm. And I thought to myself, okay, so Boston is going to have to find a way to balance their rim defense and defense on the 3-point line. At this point, they've managed to hold Giannis to single-digit points, and they've made him very uncomfortable. He was not able to have the same impact as he did against Detroit. He's being clamped in a way. I don't want to say clamped, but he's being challenged, and he's not making a lot of buckets. They're making it extremely difficult for Giannis to actually get points in the paint and actually have a good pass. So when you neutralize one of your only player, and this is your only player that's going into the post, Brook Lopez, the center, isn't even going in the post. The man's on the 3-point line. So when you take away the one guy that can go into the paint, you're basically telling Milwaukee, yeah, go ahead, hit the 3-point shot. Rely on anything on the perimeter. We're not going to give you anything into the rim unless it's a fucking free throw. And if you earned it, right? They're daring them to shoot the 3, and they couldn't shoot it that well this game. But anyway, we go into the third quarter. Boston's defense continues to suffocate Giannis. Refs start to swallow their whistle as well in the playoffs, right? So if you're a player like Giannis who really wants to get those foul calls with dribble drives, you're not going to get them. And the lack of calls really did hurt Milwaukee down the stretch. And for the entirety of the third quarter, this was just Boston's playground. They got everything they wanted. The Bucks defense starts to fall apart. So you have Boston now getting open, uncontested 3-point shots, dribble drive penetration, everything. The entire defensive scheme of Milwaukee falls apart. And, halfway through the third quarter, the Celtics got complete control of the game. There was one point in the game where I think Horford has a vicious denial on Giannis, and I really think Al Horford was the MVP of this game for Boston. He and Aaron Baines really did a good job in protecting the paint and making Giannis's life hell. He could not get anything going, and he was forced as the game went on to resort to a 3-point shot. You saw him no longer drive to the rim and instead settle for threes. And credit to him, he made his threes, but that just showed, the inherent flaw in Milwaukee's offense. And that is, they have no reliable, aside from Giannis, post offense at all. None of these guys can get to the post. And that's a huge problem when the perimeter shots are falling. You can't just eliminate one crucial aspect of the basketball court. Now, Aaron Baines had an injury in the third quarter. I thought if he is not back in the next game, this could change the series because he is very, very crucial to this Celtics team. Now we go into the fourth quarter, and this is where you see most of the Bucks just forsake the entire paint and just say, okay, we're going to launch jump shots. And this is where I do have one question regarding the Milwaukee Bucks and Giannis in general. It seems to me that Giannis does not have a reliable ISO game. right? He can't do the floater, he can't do the mid-range jump shot, or he chooses not to because he's not confident enough in it. And if you can't do that, then Boston is going to cheat when you're defending the three-point line because you're going to swarm him, and if the three-point shooters, like I said earlier, aren't hitting their shots, you're going to completely dogpile him and force a turnover, right? Now, maybe he does have an ISO game, maybe he doesn't. I would really like to see the Milwaukee Bucks, if they want to make this series a little bit more competitive, and if they want to win the next game, they're going to have to find a way to utilize the paint, or their three-point shooters are going to have to catch fire. Because, I'm sorry, unless your name is Steph Curry or Klay Thompson, you cannot rely on the three-point line, especially when your Rookie of the Year, Malcolm Brogdon, is out, right? Your rotation, like, your reliable three-point shooters are decreasing. And there was this moment in the third quarter, and I don't want to go back to it, but Eric Bledsoe gets the ball at, like, the top of the key, right? He's open for a mid-range, and he doesn't take it. And this is like, this basically shows you that Milwaukee does not have any mid-range offense. Their entire offense is you go to the rim or you go to the three-point line. And when you shut down that rim, congratulations. You have one area in the game where you can exploit. And if you can't do that, you're going to lose the game, right? Obviously, they're going to shoot a lot better. And I think the next game is going to be a lot closer. But Milwaukee, please, if you want to make this competitive, I sincerely suggest that you use some mid-range game. Now, this might not be possible because aside from Giannis, of the fact that the entire year Milwaukee has coasted the entire NBA by using their current scheme of offense. But like we all say, playoff basketball is a different beast. You need to use all the tools available to you. You cannot ignore the mid-range game, right? And you can't ignore the three-pointer either, because we saw what happened with the Spurs if you ignore the three-pointer. DeMar DeRozan and LaMarcus Aldridge, I love those guys, but they cannot shoot a three-pointer to save their life. And you know what? They relied solely on the mid-range. It came to bite them in the ass. And if Milwaukee relies solely on the three-point line, it's going to come and bite them in the ass. Now, one more thing before I end this video off. Why the hell was Pat Connaughton taking that many shots? Like, why was he taking 7 fucking shots? Like, maybe he's supposedly a good three-point shooter. Give half these shots to Mirotic. Mirotic only played 20, but give his minutes. Give half his minutes to Mirotic, or Ilyasova for that matter. Give it to your hardened, battle-tested veterans, not this guy. Like, Notre Dame 2015. This guy is new. What? Like, that was the most confusing and had to be frustrating part for Milwaukee. Like, why was Pat Connaughton taking that many shots? He took more three-pointers than anyone on the Milwaukee team. But yeah, overall, great win by Boston. They showed a blueprint on how to really contain Giannis. If this works in Game 2, or if there are no appropriate adjustments by Milwaukee in Game 2, they have laid the blueprint to beating out Milwaukee, assuming Milwaukee even comes out on top, right? So you had 4 starters for Boston that were in double figures. Everyone was contributing. Jaylen Brown had a good game too. I know people are going to say, oh, but Tatum didn't do too well. Tatum did a good job defensively, I think. I think he's going to get going in the next game. But yeah, Celtics starters you saw, extended amount of minutes. Why? Like, look at this. 30, all in the 30s. Why wasn't that the case for the Bucks? Aside from the fact that I know that Brown had, back spasms, but Brook Lopez can play definitely 30 minutes. I don't see why he can't play 30 minutes. Or if anything, why didn't you give your bench, the minutes that Pat Connaughton had? Adjustments need to be made for Milwaukee. Great game by Boston. And yeah, I'll see you guys after Game 2 for this one.